Welcome to What's the Scenario with PLRB, where we explore claims and coverage scenarios relevant to insurance professionals. I'm Alicia Watley.
I'm Tim Havler.
And I'm Mike Grode.
All right, Tim, what's the scenario?
We have a homeowner in Oregon. There were wildfires in the forests around his neighborhood, but the fire never got closer than 3 miles from his house, so he never actually had to evacuate. But the smoke was thick in his area, and enough of it penetrated into the inside of his house to leave a faint but noticeable smoky odor that does not seem to be going away. The insured is requesting smoke remediation to be performed in his house and on his contents. The adjuster inspected the property, found evidence of soot buildup on the exterior, and did notice the smoky odors indoors, but she didn't think they were that bad. She's wondering whether the smoky odors can amount to a covered loss under the standard ISO HO3.
Okay.
So today's episode is about wildfires, and I had thought that 2023 was a pretty bad year for wildfires in the U.S., but then when I looked it up, just by the number of fires and the number of acres burning, it was actually a pretty average year. It was just that a few of them were extra newsworthy, I think, in 2023, starting with the Hawaii one, which obviously was terrible, but then also the Canada ones. Here in Chicago, we were told to stay indoors several days in the summer. I don't know, Mike, did that happen to you?
Yeah, it did, even in all the way down into Columbus, which is central Ohio. So that was quite a distance. And maybe that's why it was so newsworthy, is certainly whenever you think wildfires, you think California, your West Coast, you don't think Canada, even though they do happen often there. And then how often have we seen smoke filtering down into the U.S. from Canada? I don't recall it. I'm an old man, Tim. I don't recall it happening in the past. So, yeah, this was unique to get it into Columbus.
And the funny thing is, for some reason, I don't remember all of that, but I think I was out of town when all of that was happening. So, yeah, it really didn't affect me. But I remember my dad telling me, yeah, it was smoky outside. I'm like, oh, was it? Okay.
It was a couple days. And there were the images of New York, I think. It was Manhattan. There was that weird orangish haze, which we'd never seen before. Apparently, Louisiana had a bad year for fires. I didn't know that they particularly got them. But, and then I also saw, actually, the Canada fires were bad enough that 2 Major League Baseball games got postponed. There was the Tigers at the Phillies in Philadelphia and White Sox at the Yankees in New York. So, again, hadn't remembered that, but you learn something every day.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about significant wildfires this year. And we're talking about this person in Oregon who didn't have a fire affect him personally, or the actual fire affect his home, but the smoke was a big factor for him. Are odors a direct physical loss?
Odors in Oregon, and I would say most jurisdictions, are, yes, a direct physical loss. Smoke is made of really tiny particulate matter. So it is physical things that fly around and they stick to the walls and the floors and the ceilings and clothes and fabrics and whatever else they can stick to and cause that lingering smell. And also smoke is a coverage C named peril, so it clearly was supposed to be a direct physical loss. Now I can already imagine what somebody is thinking, but what about COVID? Didn't all those courts just say COVID was not a physical loss? And it's not a bad point, but I would say viral particles kind of die off on their own pretty quickly, whereas smoke can really linger and cause that physical harm to the property.
So how long do you think it takes like a smoke smell to dissipate from a home?
Good question. I would say minor smoke damage probably goes away pretty quickly. but major smoke damage can be stubborn and it can really stick around and it can take a long time. There's a whole science based around this, which I'm not an expert in, but my understanding of the science is that the particles eventually off gas and fade. But again, it's the more severe cases where basic ventilation isn't going to do it, or cleaning with household products isn't going to do it. So sometimes you need to really do a deep clean or get the HEPA filters going, or air purifiers, or we would have to talk to our good friends, the remediation contractors who do this every day.
But hey, Tim, Alicia, have you guys ever been camping?
Try not to.
A long time ago.
So you're not fans of campfire? The smell of a campfire? Everybody loves that, right? Come on.
True.
In a short amount of time, yeah. Like if I'm roasting a marshmallow for my s'mores, I'm all good.
All right. Well, wouldn't you love that smell just to linger around your home just a little bit to remind you of that fantastic s'more that you had at your campfire?
Maybe for a little bit, but when I wake up the next day, I don't want my jeans still smelling like that campfire.
No, you guys are no fun. So my point being, Tim, do you think the insured here is just being overly sensitive? Come on. Just a little smoky smell.
So a lot of this happens to me all the time. Someone says, "Do you smell this and that?" And I always say, "No, I don't.
Right.
I don't smell it."
Point exactly. Tim.
So if it's purely subjective, it's not a good standard of evidence, I don't think. But luckily, there are objective things we can look at. One is to actually measure the number of smoke particles or particulate matter that's on a surface or in the air. There's good evidence-based science on this. Some courts in California have emphasized the need for measurable damage. So an insurance company could maybe work with, again, an expert industrial hygienist and set a threshold level where they would consider that it's no longer minor, but major enough to get the claim going. So that's one thing we can look at. And the other thing is a doctor's note. If the insured maybe has severe asthma or a smoke allergy or lung disease or some sort of medical condition, and we can get a doctor to document that, that's definitely something we can take into consideration.
So if they're not being overly sensitive, okay, got you there. What about sounds a lot like with this particulate matter and things sticking around and hard to remove? Sounds an awful lot like a pollutant to me, Tim. So isn't there a pollution exclusion that may apply here?
Sure is. Pollution exclusion. And I'll do you one better. Pollution exclusion, pollutants definition includes smoke and soot.
Was that the first word?
I forget where it is, but it's so clearly it's a pollutant. So can't we say, wait, isn't this excluded as a pollutant? No, we cannot.
What?
Because
what? Why not?
Because if the pollutant was released by a coverage C named peril, that exclusion can't apply. So anyone want to throw out a coverage C named peril here?
Rodents.
Are we going with birds again?
I love to argue about birds and bees, so yeah, we could go there. Now let's see, lightning. Would that be one, Tim? I don't know. Lightning.
If the lightning started the wildfire, I'd at least think about that. But we got two more obvious ones. One
so
would be...
I'm clueless. I'm not even around the obvious ones.
Well, you don't have a policy in front of you, so fair is fair.
Maybe I don't. That's all right.
The first one is fire.
Uh-huh.
And the second one is smoke.
Wait, what?
Obvious.
Yeah, but that's so weird that smoke is a pollutant, but smoke is also a coverage C peril, so the pollutants exclusion can't apply anyway. So what's going on there? And the answer is the peril says sudden and accidental smoke. So you can imagine if you had a candle burning in your room and you got soot up on the ceiling after 12 months. It's not a fire because we call that a friendly fire rather than a hostile fire. And it's not sudden and accidental smoke because it's gradual smoke. So we would exclude the candle soot as a pollutant, but not the wildfire soot.
Okay.
I do appreciate the kind of subtle insult, don't you, Alicia? That there are two that are obvious to anybody.
Yeah, I wasn't really paying attention because I was like, wait, what is it? And sometimes it's the most obvious answer.
Yes.
Thanks, Tim.
But yeah, Tim, you made a nice comeback by saying we didn't have a policy in front of us. So thank you.
I appreciate it. All right. So with the insured being entitled to ALE, so if they've got a doctor's note, they need to get out of the house. Could they get temporary housing?
Oh, I thought you were going with the beer. Could they get an ale? That might help alleviate some of their concerns.
I know. Maybe they wouldn't think about the smoke as much.
Right.
Yeah, it could help. ALE, yes, with the doctor's note and everything, sure. We said it's a covered loss, so then the next step is, did it make the residents? I think the ISO language is not fit to live in. So if the smoke is to that extent, say they have a smoke allergy, that's for them, it's not fit to live in. Sure, I think they could get ALE for that.
And then in addition to ALE, and I'm going to go left here, is there anything that says replacement of, like, say, furniture? So say you get the temporary housing, they clean your home, but does that also include furniture, things of that nature?
Sure. Furniture is personal property coverage C, which usually is a named peril basis. So we got to look down those 16 or 17 perils and try to find one. Mike brought up rodents. That's not a named peril, but it's a good start. Then he missed the obvious two, which were
smoke and fire.
Smoke and fire. So it's kind of the same thing like we said with pollutants. You have both of those. So because of that, then your furniture would be covered. If you can clean it, great. If it's absolutely unsalvageable, then you got to do what you got to do.
Makes sense. How about this one? Tim, I don't think, Alicia, you covered the interior. What about the exterior? So you got soot and other stuff that maybe impacts your siding, or some, I don't know, whatever. What else you have on your building envelope there that might get soot covered? Would that be something that potentially could be in play here?
Sure could, as long as it's not going to clean super easily, like with a garden hose. If it's going to take some professional cleaning and that's going to be above the deductible, exact same analysis we just did. Soot is, again, it's those tiny little particles. It's part of smoke. So a billow of smoke goes up, there's soot in there, and then eventually it settles out of the smoke and lands on your property and needs to be cleaned up.
Cool.
All right. So here's a weird question because, I like to ask weird questions. So the Canadian wildfires were so bad that they caused bad air quality in the Midwest and the Northeast U.S. Could any of that be insured, considering it started in Canada?
Okay. Oh, that's something I hadn't thought of, that it started in a different country. Although I don't think that would matter because, again, it was a fire and it doesn't say a U.S. fire or U.S. smoke. It's just fire and smoke. I think the issue there would be, I doubt by the time it got here, it was strong enough to cause any problems, especially indoors. In fact, I believe that was the recommendations they were giving us, were just go indoors because you'll be fine indoors. But by the time it had traveled all the way across the Canadian provinces, over the border, through several states, by the time it gets to your house, it's not going to be that much. The walls are going to keep most of it out. Maybe a tiny bit gets through the cracks, but it just doesn't seem like too big of a concern at that point.
So, Tim, what can we take away from today's scenario?
Okay, to recap, smoke and soot from a nearby wildfire blew onto the insured's premises in Oregon. under his standard ISO homeowners form. Although smoke and soot are listed as pollutants, the pollutants exclusion will not apply because of the name perils for fire and sudden and accidental damage from smoke. Soot and smoke are direct physical losses, so there theoretically could be coverage if it turns out that there is objectively measurable particulate matter, and consideration can probably be given to any documented sensitivities or medical conditions of the insured.
Hey, Tim, for my, I wanted one more question. I know this is out of line, so my apologies, but we kind of brought in COVID at the beginning there. Wasn't one of the things with COVID is you really couldn't, without doing some extreme testing, it was very hard to determine if COVID was present or not versus with smoke or soot. There's some pretty easy tests to figure out if you have smoke particulates.
Right, and COVID was brand new to everybody. So the science wasn't developed on how long does it stay and how long does it stick, and do we have swabs that can test it? Whereas we've been dealing with smoke since the beginning of human history, so there is a pretty good science around that and measurable levels that we can point to, actual numbers.
Cool. Thank you. Then
So, Mike, go ahead, Mike.
Alicia, somebody's supposed to ask me where they could go for more resources.
I know. I was getting ready to say, Mike, where can adjuster go to learn more?
Adjusters can always check us out at plrb.org, Alicia, and look at all the wonderful things we have. I know there's plenty of stuff on homeowners policies and smoke peril. We have some tykes. We have some coverage questions around odors from wildfire smoke. We also have an awesome CE course on investigating and resolving different types of wildfire losses. So check us out at plrb.org, and you can always look under the education tab too to find out all this awesome stuff.
And you can always go to the show notes that will give links to all of the information that Mike just shared. It'll also give you information on how you can submit your own adjuster story. That'll be read by one of us. So don't forget to subscribe and rate us, and we'll see you guys next time.
The views and opinions expressed in this resource are those of the individual speaker and not necessarily those of the Property and Liability Resource Bureau, its membership, or any organization with which the presenter is employed or affiliated. The information, ideas, and opinions are presented as information only and not as legal advice or offers of representation. Individual policy language and state laws vary, and listeners should rely on guidance from their companies and counsel as appropriate.